Imagine not being able to read the paper because your hands were shaking. Imagine not being able to read newsprint as your world faded to black. The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. With your host, Lee Martin, and co-host, Florence Myers McSwine.
Welcome to this week's National Federation of the Blind Newsline Indiana show. I am your co-host, Florence Myers McSwine, and I'm sitting here with our host, Lee Martin.
How you doing, Florence?
I'm doing well. How are you, Lee?
I'm doing fine. And I tell you what, Newsline has really been progressing, and we're getting a lot of new subscribers. And today we have something special that we would like to share with you all during our opening segment, and that is some comments from our subscribers. So if the viewers and listeners would view and listen to some of our comments of the NFB Newsline, we'd certainly appreciate it. And we thank those individuals that give their comments to NFB Newsline. So we'll be right back with our guest, Mr. Will Young, and he has a great story to share, and I think you guys should stay tuned and listen to this valuable information.
Now, thanks to NFB Newsline, I feel that my eyes have been opened to a whole new world of information. I can again keep up with sports right along with my husband and sons. They're impressed that I have this service, and personally, I am too.
I was happy to see that I can again read Guidepost and Reader's Digest. It's funny when you think about how the simple things in life, like reading your favorite magazines, can make a heart smile. I want to thank the NFB Newsline team for what they do. Thousands of Indiana residents feel isolated from the world due to vision problems. Thanks to the National Federation of the Blind, visually impaired Hoosiers can hear newspapers, circulars, and magazines from across the globe.
I'm a Vietnam veteran. I'm blind. I read Stars and Stripes on NFB Newsline.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline.
Bro, this new Travis Scott song is so lit. Straight up.
Yeah, it's fire.
Yo, let me get started on all this craziness. Like he tryna die, but better switch it up quick. Let me teach a lesson. Teacher in the building. Get ready for class, cause you about to get to school. And rule number 1, look before you cross the street. Look left, right, left again before you move your feet. Rule number 2, hold up, I'm talking to you. Put everything down, you don't end up on the news. Rule number 3 is don't run. No driver is trying to hit a child. None. Rule number 4, while crossing the street, smile and wave. If not, you might end up off your feet. Remember, kids, it's lit to not get hit. Don't follow these rules and your life might end.
We want to welcome you back to the National Federation of the Blind Newsline Indiana show. And today, Florence, we do have a very interesting guest, wouldn't you say?
We certainly do.
So let's get right to this guest of ours that we've been holding as captivity here for the last few minutes. We want to welcome you and introduce you all to Mr. Will Young. Welcome to the show, Mr. Young.
Oh, thank you, Lee. Thank you, Florence.
And we are so impressed with what you do as a volunteer for the IRIS, which is the Indiana Reading Information Services, located at WFYI. And we want to thank you once again for coming on to the show and sharing, this valuable information with our community. Now, as a volunteer, Will, what brings you to volunteering?
Well, there was a need. I had gone online just to make my yearly contribution to WFYI, and I happened to see over on the right-hand side of the screen that they were asking for volunteers for IRIS. Now, I had heard of IRIS, but I didn't know a whole lot about it, so I began looking into it. And I discovered that it was a service for the blind and visually impaired. Basically, just all volunteers go in and read different periodicals, books, newspapers, whatever. And it's a service that is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I had the time being retired, and I thought this would be a good use of my time. And so I notified the Mandy Bishop, who is the director of IRIS, and she asked me to come in, do a read audition, and I basically got the job, so to speak. And I was fortunate enough that they had an opening for Veterans Voice. And being a veteran myself, I thought this would be an ideal fit. And I share that program with Bob Amt. He does 1 week, and then I do the following week, and so we alternate back and forth. And it's worked out very well, I think.
Okay, now with the IRIS, you mentioned that it is a service for the blind and visually impaired community. Now, prior to reading, volunteering with IRIS, had you known any blind individuals?
No, not totally blind. My mother was blind in one eye and had been since a fairly young age, but she just basically adapted and worked through life, just, with single vision, basically. And in our family, I mean, it wasn't really, I don't know, something that anybody made a big deal about. We just, accepted it and went on. And myself, about 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with glaucoma, the onsets of it, and with treatment from my eye doctor and everything, we've kind of kept that at bay. And so, I mean, to me, it's just been a really good fit.
Now, there was a time that you weren't a volunteer. And, what did you do with, what trail in your path in your life did you do prior to becoming a volunteer?
Well, just prior to my retirement, I was in the trucking industry for 26 years as a dock worker and truck driver, both local and over the road. And prior to that, it was rather an eclectic assortment of jobs throughout my life. I was in television broadcasting for a period of time. I was a portrait photographer. I've worked in metal shops and cabinet shops. And I had 4 years in the military.
Okay, what branch of military did you serve?
Marine Corps.
Marine Corps, okay.
Is there any other branch?
Oh, so you want to play games today on the show, huh? Certainly, there is the U.S. Army.
Yes, I have heard.
It starts with an A, so it's at the top of the list.
That's
Marines
right.
is down at the bottom of the list.
They're all excellent branches.
They are, and as we often tease one another, there's a lot of room for respect for
Yes,
what we
very
do
much so.
as an armed forces for the United States and for the people of our country and world. So I want to thank you for your service as well.
And thank you for yours.
Yeah, appreciate it. So being a military person, and I heard you say something about television and broadcast. Mm-hmm. You want to expound on that a little bit?
I worked for Channel 13 in Indianapolis back in the old days when they were WLWI and were owned by Avco Broadcasting, and worked in production. And then after my tour there, I kind of moved on into other fields, into portrait photography and some of the woodworking and metal shops that I'd worked in also.
Okay. Now, wow, you have a plethora of a background work history there.
Yeah, I just couldn't find my niche, I guess.
Well, sure, you found it. Well, you found it.
In your employment and your personal life, I guess I'll ask, were you always in the Indianapolis area?
Yes, other than the time in the military, I've always been basically central Indiana.
So you grew up in like in a public school area?
Yes, I went to Edgewood Grade School and Burkhardt Grade School, and then to Southport High School. I graduated from there, and I did go to a short time at the IU Extension in Indianapolis.
So now that we've learned a little bit more about your professional background, I'm trying to get to the point to, just once you're retired, oftentimes people think of retirement as a great time just to sit back and kick your heels up and relax. But you've been very busy since your retirement. And you volunteered for the IRIS Indiana Reading Information Service. So you indicated that you wanted to do something on a volunteer basis, and that you were sending in your donation to WFYI. So just what made you really want to, was it your broadcasting, or was it just while you were on the docks there or somewhere, something had inspired you to come into volunteerism for Indiana Reading Services?
Well, I think it was the fact that there was a need, first off, and that I had some time. I've always enjoyed reading, whether it's books or magazines or newspapers. Also, the background in broadcasting, I was familiar with some of the equipment and the means of recording and everything, and assembling a show, which originally I didn't know I would have to do. I figured I'd just go in and the materials would be right there, and I'd just pick them up and go over them and kind of familiarize myself with them and then sit down and record them. But it was also a matter of putting together an hour's worth of programming each time that I had a show to do. And it's kind of peculiar because Bob had been doing this about probably 2-3 months before me. And at our first meeting together, when we got to sit down, we began talking about how we were going to do this so we wouldn't be overlapping, so that we wouldn't be doing the same stories week after week. And so he basically took the American Legion magazine, that was going to be one of his main sources. I was going to take the VFW magazine, and then I began finding out that there was more material out there. And so I began pulling material from Stars and Stripes, from the Military Times newspapers, news releases from the VA website. And I began organizing all of this into a program, and also pulling materials from books and interviews that I came across that have been published, and I put all that into the program. And it consumes quite a bit of time each week to put it out.
It certainly does.
Just like this program here.
It takes quite a bit
you
of
just
time.
don't walk in and sit down and just start doing it.
That is exactly
It takes
right.
some pre-planning.
And while we're talking about pre-planning and programming, my producer is telling me it's time for us to take a break.
Okay.
So we're going to take us a short pause, and we'll be right back with Mr. Will Young.
As I travel the nation, I read NFB Newsline.
I live in Valparaiso, Indiana, and I listen to my local news on NFB Newsline.
As a student, I enjoy reading current events on NFB Newsline.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline today.
I'm Danny Wayne Beamer, Program Manager of the Elder Blind Program at the Will Center in Terre Haute, Indiana. I introduce the NFB Newsline to seniors in 13 southwestern counties in Indiana. I also utilize the NFB Newsline for my radio station public affairs shows. The NFB Newsline. Experience it today.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind, and we read NFB Newsline.
Welcome back to the National Federation of the Blind Newsline Indiana show with our guest today, Mr. Will Young. And Will, now we were talking about IRIS and the volunteers, and about how many volunteers are working with or volunteering with IRIS? Would you know?
There's roughly over 100 volunteers that come in and do various programmings. And there's approximately, I think at last count I had somewhere in the neighborhood of about 55 to 60 different programs that they broadcast.
And how long have you been volunteering at?
I've only been there about a year and a half. And I work on Veterans Voice along with Bob Ampt. We alternate weeks on our programs. And the programming is really quite diverse. Of course, we have some programs very similar to what the National Federation Newsline has, as far as national and international, but on like a more local level, we do readings of the Indianapolis Star for 2 hours every day. And that live reading is recorded and then broadcast later in the day for those that missed it earlier in the day. We have readings of all the local newspapers from the east side, west side, south side, north side, as well as magazines such as AARP and some of the national magazines.
So you have a number of volunteers at IRIS, and they come from various backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And you know, I know as a listener to IRIS from time to time, that is a great service as well. And we'd like to offer just as many resources to blind, visually impaired, or print challenged individuals as we possibly can. And IRIS is a great fit for making sure that we do get information and those services and resources out there to individuals. And how would an individual that may be sitting today listening to the show or viewing the show how would they go about becoming a volunteer with IRIS?
As far as becoming a volunteer, all they have to do is just contact IRIS at 317-614-0404 or on the internet, wfyi.org/IRIS, and that's IRIS, and just request an application for a volunteer, or call them and tell them that you'd like to volunteer, and they'll set you up with an interview and an audition, and just go from there. And it's pretty straightforward and simple. It's something that you don't have to be there every single day at a specified time. It's just basically whenever you can come in and set your own schedule for the type of program that you do.
Now, what is a little bit about the history of IRIS? Can you share a little bit about that with us?
I'll do my best on that.
Okay.
IRIS, which stands for Indiana Reading and Information Services, was originally called like CIRA, And it was founded over at the University campus of Butler in their radio department. And it was back in the 80s at some point in time. And they served the blind and visually impaired audience at that time. And it was done strictly by special radio that was requested, and it was tuned to a specific frequency and had limited range, and they could listen to the readings on that. And then after Butler decided to do away with their radio department, Sarah at that time just kind of floated around a bit and was picked up by WFYI. It eventually became IRIS, and the same principle was applied in the early days of using a radio. And now that we've gone into the digital age, they also have a download that you can go to on their website and listen to a variety of the programs at your own convenience. A lot of these programs, you can just go and click on them, download them, and then listen at your own convenience. As well as they also have the live mode also, so that you can pick up what is actually being broadcast at that particular time.
Now, for your, for your show, you said that it is an hour long?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How long does it generally take you to prepare for your show?
For mine, I would say probably about 4 to 5 hours in preparation time. And that's going through magazines, newspapers, releases from the VA, media and press releases from the VA. Also, I pick up articles from Military Times and Stars and Stripes, and anything that, for my program, relates to someone who is a veteran, and specifically for someone who has visual problems or is print challenged. Because my audience is kind of twofold. It's for veterans, but it's also for veterans with limited eyesight. And I'm picking up people who are just blind or visually impaired.
And that's a great volunteer service that you do, and there's a lot of time put into it. Now, for the veterans that I've met you at the Deanna Austin's Blind Veterans program, our monthly group meetings. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, Will, it was a pleasure meeting you there as well. I noticed from the onset when we spoke about your voice, you have a great radio voice. And
he also told me I have a great radio face too. So,
but so you indicated that Bob, he does the one segment, and you do the Veterans from Foreign Wars, or how is that? Which one? Who does which?
Well, we both overlap in that. Bob merely does the recordings on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. Mine are on the first and the third Tuesdays of the month, and then they are recorded and broadcast later on that week. Bob originally, I haven't listened to one of his programs in the last few weeks, so I don't know if he's still doing it, but he was doing a lot of readings on the Congressional Medal, or the Medal of Honor winners, their stories. And he would do a couple of them on each one of his programs, as well as he was also doing news releases and things like that too.
Okay, so and you do a lot of news releases as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. I get as much information out there to the audience as possible.
So what is the most challenging part of when you want to disseminate that information, when you're gathering it all? Is there anything that you really are eager to get out there to these veterans? What's some of the most important issues you really would like to get out there that catches your eye?
Basically, for the veterans, I would say it was changes in the law and changes in what the VA is doing for veterans. Recently, Congress has finally recognized the Blue Water Navy Veterans Bill for those Vietnam veterans who were on board ship off the coast of Vietnam and Cambodia. They're finally recognizing the Agent Orange aspect of their service.
Well, we're going to take us a short break on that note, and we're going to come back and talk about that just a little bit, and we'll be right back to take our conversation with Will Young.
The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back.
I'm Danny Wayne Beamer, Program Manager of the Elder Blind Program at the Will Center in Terre Haute, Indiana. I introduce the NFB Newsline to seniors in 13 southwestern counties in Indiana. I also utilize the NFB Newsline for my radio station public affairs shows. The NFB Newsline. Experience it today.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind, and we read NFB Newsline.
Well, welcome back to this week's National Federation of the Blind Newsline show. And in closing today's show, I want to thank Mr. Will Young for being our guest, and we are looking forward to seeing you back next week, Mr. Young. And it sounds to me like you have found your niche. And now, we want to let the audience know briefly that we at National Federation of the Blind Newsline also, we have publications. We have the Veterans of Foreign Wars as well as Stars and Stripes. So listen to your NFB Newsline. If you're a veteran, you will love those publications. So we're looking forward to seeing you back next week. The National Federation of the Blind Newsline Indiana show.
The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. For more information, go to nfb-in.org. or call 855-963-6476. That's 855-963-6476. The National Federation of the Blind encourages you to live the life you want.